Absolutely. Thank you, Jojo, for sharing the floor. I hope I'm coming through loud and clear.
Perfectly.
Yes, okay. So I will give an overview of the main legal aspects, focusing on the changes between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, as well as certain call-specific conditions. So in terms of proposal submission, as well as exclusion, admissibility, eligibility, and award criteria, ethics, security, and third parties, so consortium composition. So the first slide gives you an overview of the new features in the Horizon Europe proposal. So there are new fields in Part A. So there's a new table, the researchers table. So this is basically a Horizon Europe indicator. It's to follow up on researchers' careers. There's also a table on the role of the participating organization. You will have to fill this in. Please be aware that you can choose more than one option here, so you should not feel limited to just choosing one role. And then there's a self-declaration on gender equality plans, so we will provide more details on this in further slides. And then there are some fields that have been moved from Part B to Part A. This is the ethics self-assessment and a new security questionnaire, a new security assessment. Next slide, please. So in terms of criteria, so the first one is exclusion criteria. So this is something that you will fill in the proposal submission form, Part A. And it's based on the financial regulation. Basically, there is an EDIS database check that is performed before evaluation, before award, and before grant agreement signatures, so 3 times. To verify that applicants are not subject to administrative sanctions or not in situations of exclusions. So there's a list here, bankruptcy, in breach of social security or tax obligations, grave professional misconduct, fraud, corruption, creation of a shell company, or deficiencies in complying with main obligations under other grant agreements or other contracts with the EU. And then also applicants can be refused if during the award they misrepresented information required for participating, or they failed to supply the information, or if they were previously involved in the preparation of the call. So this would be a distortion of competition and therefore a conflict of interest. Thank you. Next slide, please. In terms of admissibility, this has already been presented by Carlo and Giorgio, so I will be brief. So the same conditions as H2020, so submitted before the call deadline, so before the 23rd of June at 5 p.m. electronically. It has to be complete, readable, accessible, printable, and contain a dissemination and exploitation plan. And then the call-specific condition is that for innovation actions, the limit is 120 pages, so it's more for Part B than the general Horizon Europe limits. Here it's 120. Next slide, please. Now in terms of eligibility in terms of consortium composition, so there is no change here. The consortium should be at least one independent legal entity established in a member state and at least 2 other independent legal entities, each established in a different member state or an associated country. And we'll see later on what associated countries are and which countries can be considered as associated to Horizon Europe. Next slide, please. So in terms of eligibility conditions, there's something new under Horizon Europe. It's the gender equality plan called the GEP. So having a GEP is an eligibility criterion, not for everyone, for public bodies, higher education establishments, and research organizations from member states and associated countries. So what does this gender equality plan have to cover? It should cover publication, resources, data collection, gender data on personnel, and training. And so, as mentioned, this applies to public bodies, higher education establishments, and research organizations. So it does not apply to private for-profit organizations SMEs, non-governmental or civil society organizations. Next slide, please. And so at proposal submission form, there's a self-declaration that will be requested. A self-declaration on the JEP will be requested. And then if the proposal is selected, you will need to have a JEP before grant agreement signature. So to clarify, an organization does not need to have the JEP at proposal submission stage, but it must have the gender equality plan in place at the time of signature of the grant agreement. So this is something that will be monitored during the grant agreement preparation phase. So we will be working with the consortiums that have been selected to ensure that this is fully complied with. And in any case, support can be requested at the European Institute for Gender Equality. Next slide, please. Now, who is so that there's eligibility for participation, but there is also eligibility for funding. So these are two distinct things. And in terms of eligibility for funding, who is eligible? So entities who are established in member states, in OCTs, so overseas countries and territories. So these are basically territories that are linked to France, to Denmark, and to Netherlands. And then the other category are the non-EU countries. So who is eligible for funding within non-EU countries? Countries associated to Horizon Europe. We will see in the next slides what associated countries are. Low and middle income countries. So the list is available in the Horizon Europe program guide. And then two other categories. So countries when they're announced in the call. So this is not the case in this call. There are no additional countries announced in our call conditions. And also countries, if they're entities in countries that are exceptionally considered for funding because their participation is considered essential. So this is on a case-by-case assessment done by the granting authority. Next slide, please. So associated countries. So what is important to know is that at the stage of proposal submission, at this stage here, for the purposes of the eligibility conditions, a legal entity based in a third country officially candidate for association is eligible. At the time of the signature of the grant agreement, there needs to be an association agreement in place. So basically, they will be treated as entities established in an associated country if the Horizon Europe Association Agreement with the third country applies at the time of signature of the grant agreement. So it does not need to apply at the time of proposal submission, but it does need to be enforced at the time of signature of the grant agreement. And a legal entity based in a third country which is not candidate for association to Horizon Europe can apply as part of the consortium in which the minimum number of EU or associated country partners are present. It can apply as part of the consortium, but it cannot apply as a beneficiary of the consortium. It can apply as an associated partner. So we will see this later on. You may ask what happens if there is a member of the consortium which belongs to an associated, a country, third country that was candidate for association to Horizon Europe at the time of the proposal submission, but then at the time of the grant agreement signature, this association agreement is still not in place. What would our options be? So from a theoretical perspective, there are a number of options. The entity might be considered exceptionally eligible for funding if its participation is considered essential. It could be shifted to the status of associated partner. It could also be possible that when and if the association agreement enters into force, it enters into force retroactively, and then the entity which was associated partner could become beneficiary with retroactive eligibility of the costs, or you could also replace the entity or remove it. But also always consider that the eligibility conditions in terms of participating member states, associated countries always have to be fulfilled in this case. So these are theoretical options. In any case, if this is the case, it will be properly monitored during the grant agreement preparation phase on a case-by-case basis. Thank you. Next slide, please. So there's a list here, so you have an indication of association agreements that have started to produce legal effects. So including Israel and Turkey. The list is there for the others. And then until another category, until the association agreements start producing legal effects, there are transitional arrangements that are applicable for another group of countries, including United Kingdom and Ukraine. So United Kingdom is expected to become an associated country, and so UK entities are eligible to take part in the first calls for proposals under Horizon Europe. Next slide, please. Now the specific situation of Switzerland. So Switzerland is currently considered a non-associated third country for Horizon Europe. So this is the situation as of now, currently. And so entities based in Switzerland can participate in Horizon Europe, but as non-associated third countries. So Swiss applicants should submit their proposals as with the status associated partner. And we will see in the next slides what associated partners are. Thank you. Next slide, please. So in terms of award criteria now, I think it has already been mentioned by Carlo and Giorgio, so I will not go into depth. The same 3 award criteria as in H2020, so excellence, impact, quality, and efficiency of implementation, with some call-specific additions that are mentioned in Annex 7 of the EU Rail Annual Work Programme. So for excellence, quality of the proposed activities to achieve the deliverables. For impact, quality and credibility of the action to contribute to the master plan and to the multi-annual work program. And for implementation, appropriateness of the project management structure and quality of the proposed coordination. And 2 slides forward, Giorgio, please. Thank you. Okay, in terms of scores and weightings, so this is the same as Horizon 20, nothing has changed. Each of the 3 award criterion will be scored out of 5. The threshold for the individual criteria is 3. The overall threshold is 10. And then there's a specificity to determine ranking for innovation actions. The score for impact has a weight of 1.5. So weighting, please note that weighting is only used for ranking. Next slide, please. And now ethics, the ethics section. So the same criteria as in H2020. So for all activities funded, ethics is an integral part of research, and ethical compliance is essential for research excellence. So an ethics review process is systematically carried out in all Horizon Europe proposals, and it is based on the self-assessment at proposal submission stage. So you have to fill in the ethics self-assessment. Now the slight differences for Horizon Europe is that they will try to focus more only on serious or complex cases, and to reduce the number of ethics requirements in funded projects. Next slide, please. So there is a link here where you can find more information, a guide on how to complete your ethics self-assessment. Also, depending on which, if you fall within one of the categories that are considered, like artificial intelligence, personal data protection, profiling, etc. And so after the proposal submission stage, where there is this self-assessment, there is in any case an ethics review that is conducted. and proposals are either cleared or there is the introduction of ethics requirements, which are conditions introduced in Annex 1. So they become an integral part of the grant agreement and they are monitored throughout the implementation of the grant agreement. Next slide, please. And now this is a new edition of Horizon Europe that you will find in the proposal submission form, Part A, the security scrutiny. So now security issues are checked systematically in all Horizon Europe proposals. So in H2020, it was only for proposals submitted to topics that were flagged as security sensitive. So the focus is on whether the proposal uses or generates EUCI, EU classified information, or SEN, sensitive information, and where there's a potential for misuse of results. And so basically the checks that are based on the self-assessment can trigger more in-depth security scrutiny. Next slide, please. Time to grant. So this is set in the financial regulation and has not changed. So from call deadline to notification, 5 months maximum, and from notification invitation to grant preparation to grant signature, 3 months. Next slide, please. And so the structure of the grant agreement has changed in the sense that they tried to make it more modular, more user-friendly. So in any case, it's it's an e-grant, so it's fully electronic. From signature of the grant to the end, to project closure, all actions and communications flow via the funding and tender portal. It has what's called a corporate structure in the sense that it's based on a model corporate grant agreement. And then there's the Annex 5, where some important rights and obligations are inserted there that relate namely to IPR, to security, ethics, dissemination, open science. Next slide, please. And so here we have a slide on how you can create the constellation of actors within your consortium. So first of all, there's the beneficiary. The beneficiary signs the grant agreement and has all the rights and obligations, is responsible towards the granting authority directly. The other possibility is to have also affiliated entities. So affiliated entities have a legal or a capital link with the beneficiary. What is a legal link? A legal link is a link that predates and outdates the grant agreement. So it should not be ad hoc. It should not be made just for the purposes of the grant agreement. It should be more long-standing. It can also be the link with the beneficiary can also be capital. So what is a capital link? It's when the affiliated entity is under the direct or indirect control of the beneficiary, or is controlling the beneficiary, or is under the same control. So this covers the cases of mother companies with daughter companies, sister companies, or also affiliated entities between themselves. And the affiliate entities, they do the work and they declare costs. So they charge costs and contributions to the actions under the same conditions as the beneficiaries. They implement action tasks that are listed in Annex 1 in accordance with Article 11. And so their costs and contributions are included in Annex 2. Nevertheless, it's important to say that the beneficiary remains responsible to ensure that the affiliated entities fulfills its obligations under the grant agreement. So the affiliated entity does not sign the grant agreement, only the beneficiary signs the grant agreement. And then associated partners, so this is what we were talking about when we were mentioning association agreements. Associated partners, they do. There's another slide, so we'll go in depth later. So they do the work, but they cannot declare costs. Subcontractors, they invoice the beneficiary, so it's a price, it's not a cost. And then third parties providing contributions. So they do not, they don't implement action tasks. They just provide in-kind contributions, and if it's necessary for the implementation, they are the third parties and their contributions are listed in Annex 1, and the costs can be charged to the action. So this is specific for Horizon Europe. The costs can be charged to the action. Next slide, please. So affiliated entities, I already provided all the information, but what I did not mention is that Horizon Europe basically aligns the definition with the financial regulation. So the idea is that linked third parties under Horizon 2020 are affiliated entities under Horizon Europe. It's just that the terminology has been aligned with what is in the financial regulation. Next slide, please. And now associated partner. It's basically derived from the status of international partner in H2020. So associated partners are mentioned, are listed in Article 9, and they implement action tasks that are listed in Annex 1, but they do not receive EU funding. Their costs are not eligible. And again, beneficiaries have to ensure that the obligations are fulfilled by the associated partners. So, for example, proper implementation, absence of conflict of interest, confidentiality, ethics, record keeping, etc. So the beneficiary is in the first line with the granting authority again. And next slide, please. But I think that is it. And I will be ready now to take any questions. I saw there were a number of questions appearing on the chat. I wasn't able to.
Yes, indeed, Valerie. I already replied to a few of them, but we can take on board the others. I haven't replied already. So there is one question about the social science and humanity, if it's part of the program, and if yes, how SSH researcher, research consultancy, research center consultancy participate to the call. I don't know if you have a direct answer for it. Otherwise, we're going to come back to you in the chat.
Maybe we come back, but in any case, in the proposal submission form, you have to define the category. So it should appear there, but we can come back to the person with more details.
Okay. So maybe, Laurent, you can also better specify exactly what you are expecting. Then another question is about Canada, if it is also an associated country. I think it isn't.
I think it's not. It's not. It
Exactly.
wasn't under.
It is not, but as I think Valerie already presented, they can participate as associated partners, which is the old further countries participation without funding. So then Hank is asking if there have been evolution in the situation with UK, the participation of UK. So if you can reply to this, Valérie.
Well, in any case, this has no influence on proposal submission stage. So UK entities are fully eligible to participate. They can be indicated as beneficiaries at this stage. In the proposal submission stage, and the evolution of the situation will be monitored as the grant agreement preparation phase evolves. So we have high hopes that an association agreement will be signed with the UK before. And should this not be the case, though it seems that it will be the case, but should this not be the case, there are a number of options that will be available at the moment of the grant agreement signature to try to either change the status to associated partner, to consider it exceptionally available for funding, to replace or remove. But we can reconfigure at that time, and we will monitor closely the situation until then.
Okay, good. So the next question is regarding the participant, what is the role of the Europe Trade Joint Undertaking founding member, what they can do, what they can't they do, and what they should they do? So maybe I reply directly to this question. So but the role of the founding member is, as the name is saying, our founding member of the joint undertaking. But I think the question it's more related to the project proposal. As we mentioned before, the call is completely open, so there is no particular role, beside the fact that, as Carlo mentioned at the beginning, if the member are part of a consortia that is a consortium that is applying to this call, we expect that the member needs to contribute with additional activities, and therefore their funding rate de facto is even further lower down. And what they should do is simply like applying and implementing what we have described in the topic call, if they will be applying and if they will be selected for funding. So the next question, can just funding member be a beneficiary in the project? I already replied, no, of course. Or affiliated entity can also be beneficiary and accordingly sign the GA. So the way how founding member can participate, but not only related to founding member, any company, they can participate with affiliated entities or with entities that are linked to the beneficiaries directly participating as beneficiary in the grant agreement. Of course, the fact of the linked companies participating as direct beneficiary in the GA increase the administration, because they will need then to sign the grant agreement. I don't know, Valerie, if you have further compliments. Yeah. So are there any further requirement for the legal entity between affiliated entities and beneficiary, or any long-term contract not for the project purpose only is considered enough to prove the affiliation? So Valerie, maybe you want to provide a reply.
Exactly. So the link, if the link is not capital and if the link is legal, it should be a long-term cooperation. You should be able to provide a supporting document that indicates a long-term cooperation that predates and outdates the grant agreement. So what we're looking for is to see that it's not something that was signed specifically just now for the grant agreement purposes, but that you do have a long-term cooperation with this entity.
Yeah. So the next question, the slide, yes, will be shared, are actually already published on our website. If you scroll the chat before, you can see the slide, the link to the slide. So they will be shared and published, and they are already published. So referring to the participation in the grant agreement, the question is if Swiss entities count as associated partner. Valerie, I think the answer is yes.
Well, if you want at this stage, if you want to integrate Swiss entities, then the only option would be as a associated partner, as indicated. If an association agreement enters into force later, and if it is retroactively applicable, then the status can be changed. But this is very hypothetical at this stage. So now, for the time being, yes, as associated partner.
Okay, is there any fixed rate percentage? To what extent the budget can be allocated to subcontracting?
So I remember I don't know that the percentage, I think sometimes it's referred to not more than 15%, but I think
no. There is no fixed percentage.
Yeah, we don't use the fixed percentage. What we do consider is that in any case, usually normally the beneficiaries should be able to implement the action tasks, and if necessary to implement the action, they can use third parties. So you should always consider that it should be limited. It should be a limited scope of subcontracting, and of course they should be selected based on best value for money and absence of conflict of interest.
Okay. If you can explain again the linked third party, this is a question.
So basically under Horizon 2020, there were actors that were called linked third parties. And now under Horizon Europe, they are called affiliated entities. So it's the same concept, but it's just that the terminology was aligned to the terminology that's included in the financial regulation. And what are affiliated entity? They are linked to the beneficiary with a legal link or a capital link. So at the grant agreement preparation phase, you will have to sustain this link by providing us the supporting documents that prove it, either legal or capital. Capital is, for example, to have more than 50% of the voting rights, to have the majority holding of shares, and then a legal link is a long-term collaboration with the entity, and they can implement the parts of the actions. They charge costs directly to the grant. They do not sign the grant agreement. They are not beneficiaries, but they belong to the consortium. So they charge costs and contributions to the actions under the same conditions as the beneficiaries, and their costs and contributions are listed in Annex 1. They are named in Article 11, and they implement the action tasks that are listed in Annex 1. So they're almost treated like the beneficiaries in the sense that they have the same, let's say, rights and obligations, but they don't sign the grant agreement. And the beneficiary remains responsible towards the granting authority for the fulfillment of the obligations by the associated entity. So the obligations are, for example, we already mentioned a few, record keeping, absence of conflict of interest, confidentiality, dissemination and exploitation, these kinds of obligations.
Okay. Thank you. So if then the next question is if there are any restriction in terms of nationality for subcontractors.
So basically, the subcontracting cannot be used to circumvent the rules on funding. So I would say this is the most important thing to keep in mind. So if you refer to the eligibility conditions for funding, you should follow the same for subcontracting.
Okay, can you please repeat what is the...
Sorry, Giorgio, but maybe you can tell this person that this is something we can provide more because there are exceptions. So maybe
several conditions,
more at
yes.
Written stage.
So indeed, maybe we will publish a question and answer on it. Yeah, so indeed, when it's a bit complex to reply verbally, it's good to put it on writing. Can you please repeat what is the status of Israel?
So Israel you can definitely submit it as associated country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So associated country means that is fully eligible for funding.
Yeah.
UK government has pledged to fund the UK beneficiary on product. Okay, this is just an information. Okay, good. Will the participation of a founding member lower the overall funding rate of 60% of the project? No. As we mentioned, the overall funding percent of the project is 60%. The lowering that I mentioned of their own funding rate is because on top they are bringing what we call additional activities that are excluded and on top of the eligible funds of the project. Can affiliated entities outside Europe apply for funding via EU beneficiary?
So the affiliated entities, they have to fulfill the same conditions for eligibility for funding as the beneficiary. So you have to maybe, if I don't know if you want to go back to the first slide. but be either in an entity established in a member state or an entity established in an OCT, overseas countries and territories, or associated country, or exceptionally eligible for funding. So they should be in the same cases as the beneficiary.
It was here, sorry. Okay, I will show the slide in a minute. So the next question, can you provide such a template to prove the long-term relationship with an affiliated entities? We don't have a template.
We don't have a template. But it can be, let's say, a long-term research collaboration agreement. Yeah, so this is the slide. That was the slide on who is eligible for funding. So this applies to beneficiaries and affiliated entities. So be established in a member state or in an OCT or in an associated country to Horizon Europe, or be a low and middle income country. The list is in the program guide, or exceptionally be eligible for funding if your participation is considered essential.
Exactly. Okay. So in any case, there is no so coming back to the last question, there is no template because each of you may have a different type of arrangement in the long-term, long time relation as you wrote with your affiliated entity. So there cannot be one single template. Then yes, then here there is the questions about the participation. So you are an historian with very well expertise and to want to participate into a call. How do you find relevant calls and beneficiaries? Well, relevant call, you can find it in reading the topic of the call if it does match what you can provide to a consortium, and how you can find the beneficiaries. As we mentioned previously, all the person that have expressed an interest for this info day will receive the information about each other and their interest about the different destinations. And in addition, you can also look into the funding and tender portal where the call it is allocated, when the call of Europe's Ready is allocated. And in there, you can find some IT tool that will help you to identify other not yet beneficiary, but potential beneficiaries, meaning companies and entities interested in a particular topic and in building up a consortium. But we can also further look into your specific questions later on by chat. So Bertram is coming back asking what the long-term association should contain to demonstrate the affiliated entities link.
Collaboration in the research field, but maybe we can see if there's something more specific to sustain the legal link, and we can provide a written answer.
Okay. So back to the affiliated entities, in case of long-term cooperation, does the cooperation need to be in the scope of research? Yes, this is also linked, or any business relation are sufficient, provided they are long-term?
We'll provide a written answer to clarify that.